Well, this is it. It's one thing to say, change is inevitable, and then it's another to actually set people up with the ability to self-regulate or to kind of find nervous system safety. So even if you're not experiencing any symptoms, no concerns, everybody should make their health a priority in their 40s at this time. And it's really because this is a significant hormonal transition, which involves a recalibration of lots of systems in the body. This is similar to puberty, it's similar to pregnancy, and it's similar to postpartum in terms of what that requires of our body, and that this time of hormonal change can uncover areas of health that need to be addressed. Maybe things you could ignore, when you were 25.
Welcome, love, to Wild Flow, the podcast for wild and wise women devoted to honoring your body's wisdom, reclaiming your cyclical power, and walking as a feminine leader in life, love, and through your soul work and purpose. I'm Charlotte Puanto, embodiment coach, ritual priestess, menstrual cycle educator, and feminine business mentor, here to guide soul-led women to step forward as their most magical, womb-awakened, authentic, and sovereign selves. On the podcast, we have rich and deep conversations with women I deeply admire who are leading the way in the reclamation of sacred feminine power. Ready for a new episode, my love? Let's flow. Welcome to Wild Flow. I am so excited to share this conversation with you. That is with Sophie Gleitzman, who is one of my dear besties who I get to share my life with. Sophie is also really passionate as a women's hormone health naturopath about demystifying hormones and empowering clients, women, with self-understanding at every stage in life. She's a university qualified naturopath, really taking an intuitive approach. She deeply embodies cycle wisdom and cyclical living and is really, really the go-to person in my life who I have really deep down the rabbit hole conversations about cyclical living and hormones and spirituality as well. And we have been walking this path together for a good few years. Sophie helps women rediscover their menstrual health, navigate the transition of perimenopause and menopause, supports genitourinary balance, and addresses issues with sleep, digestion, and stress resilience. She's also a herbalist, a plant witch, which is what I call her. Her toolkit includes thorough investigations, going beyond the GP level of testing, individualized herbal formulas, nutritional medicines, diet coaching, flower remedies, menstrual cycle awareness, and lifestyle guidance, offering a holistic approach to whole body health. Sophie and I and another friend practitioner, Sinead, are hosting in the Southern Highlands on International Women's Day 2025. This is in Australia, in person, a one-day retreat called Fearless, where we really want to prepare women, whether you're in your 30s or 40s, whether you're deep in the throes of perimenopause, or this is just on the horizon of your awareness that it might be coming, but don't feel like anything that you are experiencing right now is related to perimenopause. We want you to feel empowered and prepared and supported in community in a sacred circle of sisters with tools and wisdom and knowledge so that we can really be empowered collectively to move through perimenopause as an empowered rite of passage. We know that proactive measures, that practicing our power and our tools now before we get to the point where we really need them is how we can reclaim this from an inevitable time of destruction and fear and chaos into the initiation, the awakening of our wild woman self in the enchantress phase post menopause. We are going to be bringing different perspectives. Sophie with the naturopathic plant medicine angle, Sinead with breath work and nervous system support, and me with womb and rite of passage, wisdom and embodiment practice to hold you, to get to know your allies, to be empowered with a toolkit, and to be able to reframe and reclaim the power of this rite of passage. So today I'm talking with Sophie about the tools that she uses and works with her clients on that really support from a holistic way to move through perimenopause. She's bringing in allies and practices that make a really big difference that you can do yourself, and also talking about how to get the right kind of help from practitioners to hold you in this process. Sophie's talking about what perimenopause is and the different phases of perimenopause in a really simple way, so that you can sort of understand the different phases that are to come, or even where you're at right now. So you can kind of place yourself, maybe your friends, like where we're all at on this perimenopause journey. She's busting myths about what perimenopause means, what it has to mean, what it has to be like, at the stages and ages that things happen at as well. And she's really bringing in some really fantastic hormone health support, hormone wisdom, and just whole body wisdom, so that we can picture our 40s as this time of real, like reclaiming and prioritizing our health, and just setting ourselves up for the second half of our life. Obviously, I absolutely love this conversation. As I say, me and Sophie go deep often, and this was no different. So whether you, as I say, are in your 30s or 40s or even in your 50s, maybe just earlier on in life too, where you're really setting yourself up for like understanding the trajectory that you're on right now and seeing maybe where you're honoring, not honoring, where you're listening, not listening to your body, then how we can just bring in some simple practices into the everyday, or just as much as we can, to make this accessible, easy, and really, really positive and empowering, despite the fact that we are stepping into the void, the mystery of our second puberty of perimenopause. So if you want more information on Fearless, whether you're in Sydney, Canberra, whether you're flying in from interstate, who knows, even overseas, like maybe, Fearless is happening on Saturday, 8th of March, 2025 in Mittagong, New South Wales. And we would absolutely love you to come along. This is a one-off, really special retreat. It's a whole day. It's intimate, max 15 women in the space. So we can really hold you on this incredible reclamation, healing, learning journey. Right, no more to say on that. Sit back, my love, and enjoy this rich episode of Wild Flow. You're going to want to come back to this again and again. Hi, and welcome to Wild Flow Podcast. I'm so looking forward to this chat. I've got one of my besties, Sophie, here today. We get to do life in real life in Southern Highlands, Australia, together, and yet share like such a passion when it comes to women's health and well-being and hormones and menstrual wisdom. And today, it's just like so fun to have you here, Sophie. So welcome. We're going to chat all things perimenopause and becoming fearless in that transitional time as well. So welcome, Soph. How are you
Thank you,
today?
babe. I'm very good. And, there's not enough podcasts about perimenopause out there right now. So I feel like we need to contribute. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you too.
So let's drop in then with a cycle check-in, and I'm going to invite you to share where you're at in your body, in your cycle, and how that's feeling for you here and now. And I'll go first. Um, so, oh, I had to check actually. I'm on cycle day 18 today, post ovulation. I think I actually ovulated around cycle day 14 today at this cycle, 14, 15, which for me is like not usual. I've been ovulating later, by a few days. So, just noticing like my ovulation timing is really changing every cycle. And so I'm just really noticing when I'm getting all of those fertile signs and ovulation signs. And just sort of, I guess, practicing being okay with um, my period not coming at exactly the same time every single month. Um, so yeah, interested to notice what this was like for me. I had a very full ovulation energy this time, which was lovely, just coincided with my kids going back to school. So I got to really kind of enjoy that rise in energy and like, oh, all of the feels, all of the tingles and joy of ovulation. Um, which I haven't experienced every single cycle. So right now I'm on this kind of like gentle, like I feel like I'm riding a wave of momentum and just a little bit like not flat energy at all, but sort of not peak and go kind of bursting at the seams, but like like the post orgasm glow is what comes to mind. Um so yeah, just really kind of feeling that and yeah, enjoying it and really kind of taking my foot off the pedal, even though it is a busy week for me this week. But just wanting to kind of really ride the momentum and enjoy it and ah, be my heart. Yeah, as I connect with you all. So a little bit about cosmic cycles. Um, we've just had Lamass here in the Southern Hemisphere. So first harvest festival halfway between summer solstice and the autumn equinox, and kind of like where I'm at in my cycle. That kind of like end of summer, still warm, not raging hot, but kind of like still long days, and just a real invitation to start reflecting if you are in the southern hemisphere where you're at in terms of the solar cycle that would have started mid last year, what's harvesting, what's really coming to fruition, and what isn't. So, opportunity to kind of tune in and notice where your energy's going and where you're being called to place your energy. Moon-wise, we had new moon nearly a week ago, so just at that, coming up to first quarter, that's like the complete opposite of Lamass and where I'm at in my body, which is like that, like rising and like intensifying, like very coming outward, manifesting, get shit done kind of energy. Sort of like, I'm here. So that's yeah, quite an interesting opposition for me, just in my body right now. But it feels um yeah, like it's not an energy that's really particularly affecting me. Whereas like the new and full moons really do. So I'm gonna leave that there for us all to kind of feel into and invite everybody listening to just check into where you're at as well in your body and the earth and all of that. And Sophie, what would you like to share, my love? How are you in your cycle?
I I'm basically where you are. We are interestingly synced. I think I'm about cycle day 16. And I, this cycle, had a very clear sense of ovulation on day 13. My ovaries in the last couple of years have become very loud at ovulation, very like, hello, lots of, and it's interesting because it is then quite clearly on one side or the other and it changes cycle to cycle. But both sides at the moment are quite equally, a sensation of fullness, not really cramping. It just feels like everything's kind of puffed up a bit and there's pressure. It's like my ovaries are kind of pressing outwardly. And that can be quite a common feature of the early perimenopause process, which we're obviously going to get into a lot more. So I'm 43, turning 44 later this year, and I'm really um just noting some subtle shifts and some interesting changes. And at this point, just kind of noting those with curiosity, I think. Um, but actually thinking a little more about how I'm feeling in terms of being at this point in the cycle. I love when my inner cycle aligns with where we are in the season and the wheel of the year. So I'm really feeling that kind of late summer, abundance. Like this has been for me too, quite an energy filled ovulation. Back to school has definitely helped, but it's been beautiful to reconnect. And there was a gorgeous women's circle on Saturday night where we celebrated La Masse and really kind of dropped into our bodies in that regard. So I found that has been a beautiful anchor into this time of year and also what's happening in my body. Um, and I know that I'm still in my inner summer because I had a sexy dream last night. And that only
Ooh.
happens, that only happens at a very particular point in the cycle. Yeah. But
Oh,
yes, I'm sure we'll talk about this again at some point, but I every cycle am reminded how incredibly holding and supportive and anchoring and reassuring I find having this cycle awareness. I actually think it's one of the key aspects to navigating the changes of perimenopause is having that sense of being able to drop into both the inner cycles but also the outer cycles. But yes.
yeah. Mm. Thank you so much for sharing. I love that we're like coming at everyone today from like the exact same energy. Yeah, I love that. And I get sex dreams like when I'm ovulating too, and it's like I don't get them any other time, and I'm like, hello, like, woo, like really, really kind of like vivid dreams. Yeah, it's so funny. I'm really interested what you were just sharing there about those subtle changes that you're experiencing around ovulation. And as you were describing like the fullness, I was like, oh yeah, I get that too. It's sort of like sometimes I almost feel a little bit like I'm like, oh, I'm getting a bit crampy. Am I like getting towards my period? And then I'm like, hang on, no, you're like mid-cycle. And so I can sort of feel ovulation happening. And it's not that it's like on the side of the ovaries, it's more like in the middle, like in the kind of center of the womb. And it's
Mm,
not crampy. I wouldn't call it cramp, but I would call it uh, like yeah, like a fullness or like
mm,
sometimes I feel really bloated as well.
mm,
Um, and so I was just really reflecting on, I think it'd be a really good place to start with, I guess some of the, like, how do you know? Here's a question. How
mm,
do you know which symptoms are early onset of
mm,
perimenopause versus typical that you might experience at any point? Because, like, say I'm
mm,
39, turning 40
mm,
this year, and for a lot of us at this sort of like late 30s, early 40s, we could be kind of like, oh, like we're far too young for any of that. But we know that perimenopause is like a long, slow process, just like puberty is. It takes, like really a good decade for from when those very first changes start happening in the body on a kind of cellular level to when we really see that full like last period, has been like 12 months since, which is that marker of menopause. And it can be different durations for lots of people and it happens at different ages for different people.
mm.
But I just feel like this could be a really good way to kind of get into like how do we know when we're entering perimenopause? What's the definition or markers?
Absolutely. And look, as you said, it can be very individualized. There's no set age. There's no one kind of experience in the body. as far as I understand, that characterizes, okay, this is it, you're here now. But because, we're trying to make sense of this as best as we can, from a medical point of view, and interestingly, from a like a scientific definitions point of view. Think about how women being involved in clinical trials, depending on where a woman is in her cycle, although unfortunately many women historically have actually been put on the pill when they go into a clinical trial just to create that consistency. But science is understanding that we have to be able to make some sense of the individual presentation of a woman in a clinical trial. And so there's been some really beautiful work to try to create sort of staging, which is something I'd really like to talk about today and talk through, I guess, what those stages, how those stages have been identified and the kind of ballpark ages that they might be happening. And from a physical point of view, some of the things that you might start to notice really in terms of the menstrual cycle that can start to give you clues about where you are in that process. I do want to start, though, by really emphasizing, for starters, for someone who's clicked onto this podcast and actually has no idea what perimenopause is, the simplest way I think to put it is that it's the last few years. And as you say, it can be, it might be a couple of years, it might be, spanning out to 8 to 10 years, but the last few years of getting your period. And it's the changes that are occurring in your body, really through, all parts of your body and also your emotional, spiritual, psychological selves that take you from the hormone fluctuations of our cycling years, which change throughout the monthly cycle, right? Estrogen and progesterone as key hormones, but they change in a regular pattern. And therefore, there's relative stability throughout what we call the kind of reproductive phase, even though it's not all about making babies, but that is what the body, is set up for. And then menopause, from my perspective, and there are different kind of views on this, but is actually when you haven't had a period for 12 months. So perimenopause takes you all the way, as you say, potentially from the kind of mid to late 30s, all the way through to whenever for you happen to have not had a period for 12 months. And then you kind of graduate. One of my mentors and colleagues and gorgeous friends, Lara Bryden, speaks about this idea of graduating. I'm sure other people do too, to menopause. And that sounds kind of cool. Like you have to work hard to get there and then you graduate to menopause.
The certificate.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things, the overarching ideas that really characterizes or experiences that really characterizes perimenopause is that the hormone fluctuations get bigger, I guess, is the simplest way to explain it. And they fluctuate beyond what we've experienced as familiar before, which actually does hark back to the transition of puberty when our cycle was establishing itself in the first place, right? So teenage girl, not getting any period, and then that process commences and it takes, years for that cycle to really establish. So another way to think about perimenopause is like a second puberty where we're going from this predictability through a big transition time into a new normal. And there's other gorgeous, I guess, emotional and psychological aspects to that idea of a second puberty. And we can get to that if we do, but other people speak about that beautifully. Please listen to Charlotte's earlier podcast with Alexandra Pope and Shani Hugo Wurlitzer.
I'll put the link in the show notes.
Do it. But the other thing I want to say before we go through these stages is that perimenopause can include times of both higher and lower estrogen. So estrogen being one of the key reproductive hormones, one of the key hormones that drives our menstrual cycle. And it's a wonderful, incredible, amazing hormone. But when it's higher than we're used to and lower than we're used to, and the fluctuation between those two states, there's the potential there for symptoms. And then we also eventually stop ovulating and therefore we stop making progesterone, and that loss of progesterone also creates and contributes to symptoms. So really, this is the thing we know for sure about perimenopause is that it's a time of change, and the change is inevitable. There's nothing we can do to stop the change. We can buffer the process using some of the beautiful tools that I'll talk about later on. But the change is the part that we kind of have to make peace with, I suppose. And I feel like all of these conversations we're having about, how to be prepared and how to set ourselves up well, a big piece of that is actually about getting comfortable with the fact that things are going to change. And there's challenge, but I also think opportunity in that.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and really explaining, like, from I guess, like an overview, kind of a simplistic view as well, that's really easy to grasp, especially when we're talking about hormones, and it can be a bit like, oh, what? I'm lost. And like just this idea that, um, you know, it's it's changes, but like, what does that change mean? And it's the fluctuation, the highs, like um the wavelength, almost like high,
Mm,
from high to low estrogen,
mm.
and
Yeah,
like
correct.
that fluctuation, and then the lack of like progesterone over time as well to really
Mm,
buffer that, that's
mm,
really causing all of those symptoms. And so yeah, I think it's, what I really love about the way you approach this is that you very much, you're a naturopath, you're a plant witch, herbalist, um and you bring in all of these beautiful allies to really support women really holistically. But yet you also have this real appreciation for the cycle awareness and for, the psycho-spiritual rite of passage aspect of this as well, which is such, for me, like my more area of expertise.
mm,
And just this appreciation, I love what you said there. Like, we can't stop the change, but we can nurture it and we can support ourselves and we can buffer it and we can move through it feeling, like we know what's coming. We can have that sense of awareness. We can be held by our cycle, by those um, different seasonal energies and phases of the menstrual cycle. And even as that changes and we reach unfamiliar territory, we've still got that kind of map that will orient us, and kind of hold us through, like, okay, I'm in this phase now, or whoa, I feel like I just skipped a season and I'm suddenly over here. And that kind of like not being lost at sea and therefore
mm,
distrusting our bodies, I think is like something I would really love women to feel, and I want to feel as myself as well as I approach my 40s.
mm,
Um, it's like, yes, this is going to be chaos at times, and it is the unknown, and it is like, like a long period of change. But,
mm,
I think when we go back to when we look at puberty, it's like we don't know what the fuck's happening. Like, we're children and we only know what our parents teach us and what we get taught at school and what somebody might say in the playground. But generally, we are like at the mercy of this process that is like being held or not held by the external world. And it's like if all you've ever known is a stable body from naught to whatever age you're really in puberty, and then you start having a period, oh my God. Like, we have this opportunity with perimenopause to not be completely in the dark and not be like, what the fuck is happening, and not rely on other people to like like need to kind of fix it or give us the information. Like, we are empowered adult women. We can go out there, we can get the information, we can set ourselves up, to really like hold ourselves, but ask for the holding as well that we need. So I think of this as like a really great time to, like, how do we want to be supported through this rite of passage? And so that's how I want to frame this conversation as well, um, as we go into more detail, like with you, Soph, on like, so what are these phases, and like what are these tools and allies that you work with and want to bring in. So like really just feeling into like, it, change is inevitable, but chaos isn't. Become fearless about perimenopause by learning to trust the process and build your own holistic toolkit so you can reconnect to the wisdom of your body. Whether you're in your 30s or 40s, are in perimenopause now or not, preparing for a healthy, confident, and empowered menopause rite of passage starts now. Perimenopause, the process of hormonal change, begins slowly from the age of 35 onwards, taking many years to complete. You might not see outward signs yet, but like puberty in reverse, changes are happening, and gathering support, knowledge, wisdom, and tools is essential. Introducing Fearless, our one-day perimenopause power retreat for women seeking a holistic, expansive approach to supporting your well-being in body, mind, and soul and sisterhood. Join us in Mittagong, Southern Highlands, New South Wales, this International Women's Day, 8th of March, for a powerful one-day experience where we'll be covering a whole broad range of topics and experiences, knowledge, wisdom, embodiment, journeys, and ritual. Held in an intimate sacred circle of women, you will leave feeling informed, empowered, connected, and even excited for this powerful phase of your life. Right now, until the end of March, we have early bird tickets available. Save $100 and use Afterpay to spread the cost. Come and join us now. We'll see you there at Fearless.
Necessarily.
I
inevitable.
absolutely love this point you're making about, we are grown ass women now and we can approach this with, curiosity and also the reassurance. Like we can take reassurance from the fact that the symptoms that are not going to happen for everybody, it's incredibly individualized, but the symptoms, if they are going to happen, are temporary. There are, for most people, the symptoms of perimenopause resolve when the new normal is established. So that's, postmenopause. And that, obviously can take whatever time it takes. But yeah, if you go speak to a 60-year-old woman, they're not experiencing, or they're much less likely to be experiencing the list of concerning symptoms that someone maybe at 49 or 53 is, for example. And these are all just very kind of general ages, please don't get too attached to any specific thing happening at a specific age. So we say that if you're going into perimenopause naturally, meaning it hasn't been medically induced, there's only what we think is only about 25% of people have really severe symptoms. Many people experience just mild symptoms that may or may not need support. Some people experience no symptoms whatsoever. It's like, oh, it's just finished, it's done. So this is not an inevitable shit show. But the important conversation that we're having is that for some people, it is a hard process. And that's where understanding the process better, feeling empowered around, okay, cool, this is maybe where I am. So maybe I've got only a couple of years left, etc. And what are the allies and support I can bring in? So let's talk about that.
Let's dive in. Over to you.
One point I'd love to make, again, from the beautiful Lara Bryden. She speaks about perimenopause this time, like, so say essentially your 40s, say, but it could be, let's say, 35 to 55 as a critical window for health. So even if you're not experiencing any symptoms, no concerns, everybody should make their health a priority in their 40s at this time. And it's really because this is a significant hormonal transition, which involves a recalibration of lots of systems in the body. This is similar to puberty, it's similar to pregnancy, and it's similar to postpartum in terms of what that requires of our body, and that this time of hormonal change can uncover areas of health that need to be addressed. Maybe things you could ignore, when you were 25. At 45, those things have maybe come up to the surface more. And I think our 40s are the perfect time to make health a priority. In particular, brain, bone, metabolic health, immune health. Lara's brilliant book about all of this is called Hormone Repair Manual. Highly recommend. Yeah. I just really want to make that point because it's a busy time of life. We got lots going on. And in some ways, the physical symptoms of perimenopause can actually be the wake-up call that we need to refocus on our health. Again, there is an opportunity there, even though we might prefer that it's not happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I really feel that. I feel that like, um, like both of like so I'm in my 30s, but my husband's like mid 40s, and obviously he's a man and it's different, but it's like, he's always sort of saying like, all the things that he could put up with and tolerate in his earlier years, like he just can't now. And it's like, you hear this from women who are in their 40s as well. It's like the ways that we could just, you know, buffer and just get on with it, and it's like not have much sleep and get up and go, or like we might have a bit of a health disagreement, and it's like, well, it's not going to really rock the boat. I feel like what's coming is like this time like a reckoning of kind of like, well, we've been putting all this off and kind of burying it under the hatchet a little bit, but now it's really time. And it's like the more that we just in our 40s, it's like careers probably in full swing if you're working, parenting, like you might have small children, your children might be a bit older but still need you. You might, start to have family, like parents even that need something of you. And we just have like such a fullness. I think like stress is really at a peak at this sort of time. And it's like we're trying to hold a lot and do a lot and be a lot. And I feel like, our bodies are only so capable of maintaining like balance. Um, and it's like, it's not that we're getting old, it's just that our body's changing. And so when we get these symptoms, I'm just really going to treat it as like, and I do now, it's like, curious, like, what is my body telling me? So, if it's like, it's going to get our attention one way or another. And the more we can listen sooner and earlier, I feel like, and you tell me if I'm right, but my sense is that if we don't ignore things and we kind of explore things, then we can like really nurture and buffer these symptoms. But when we, like with anything, when we bury things under the our head in the
Mm.
sand, then it's going to kind of intensify and kind of come and scream at us in the face and try to get our attention. Is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, there are some potential risk areas for women through this time. One of those is metabolic and cardiovascular health. So just those standard blood tests that you do with the GP where they're looking at, lipid studies. And I mean, you can kind of dig a little bit further into metabolic health by testing fasting insulin, etc. if you suspect that you might be insulin resistant, which can actually be one of the underlying drivers of the like difficulty losing weight that can come in through perimenopause. But certainly the changing hormones, and as estrogen goes up, often cortisol is kind of there along with it. And increased cortisol in general can be quite a feature of the perimenopause process. So all of that can also contribute to increased risks around metabolic health. And so early intervention, early exploration, identification and intervention is always going to be better than leaving those things until you're 60, 70. Now's the time to build a healthy body that's going to take you through, potentially another half of your life. If you're
Mm.
40 and you want to live to 80 and beyond, we've still got half our lives left. It feels like a great opportunity now to actually, reassess, where am I at? What do I need going forward? Yes, we will get to that further. Let me take you through some of
Mm.
these thoughts around. So this comes from some published research from the Stages of Reproductive Aging workshop, which the acronym, if anyone wants to Google this, there's some good papers around it, is the STRAW 10 plus. And this work was trying to seek clarity around a woman's life stage, as I said earlier, and actually promote consistency of the way of the terminology of the way we kind of refer to perimenopause or menopause in terms of women's involvement in scientific studies. So I've talked about the reproductive stage, which is those years essentially from when you get your period through to when things start to shift and change at perimenopause. But even right at the end of this reproductive stage, we call it the late reproductive stage, which could be mid to late 30s. For some women, it could be early 40s. That's characterized by subtle changes in flow, in menstrual flow, and or cycle length. So actually what I see clinically and have experienced personally is the menstrual cycle is still regular, as in you're not kind of going months without a bleed, but the cycle overall is just a bit shorter. So maybe where you were 27, 28 days, now you suddenly notice, oh, it's actually more like 24, 25. And that's still a normal cycle length because there's still enough space within 24 to 25 days for you to have your follicular phase where you develop the follicles in the ovaries, then to ovulate where you release one of those follicles, and then to make progesterone in the luteal phase where you hold the menstrual cycle, so where you hold the lining of the endometrium in case you're going to get pregnant. It's sort of like there's like a minimum amount of time we need for all of that to occur. I think even down to the kind of early 20s in terms of cycle length, that would be okay. But certainly a 24 to 25 day cycle starts to become more common. But what's happening there is because it's often the luteal phase, so from ovulation to the bleed, that changes. One of the big characteristics of this late reproductive stage is worsened PMS, worsened PMDD for people who that's their pattern, or just increased anxiety, maybe some insomnia in that later part of the cycle, and overall lower stress resilience. So it's really interesting, we've just talked a bit about the role of cortisol changing throughout perimenopause. That's actually one of the first things people might start to notice, is that they're maybe just in the premenstrual time, but that they're more reactive, maybe a bit more angry, and that overall things that they could kind of deal with more easily impact them more. Life stresses, challenges, projects, having a lot on starts to feel like it's more. And there's nothing that necessarily needs to be done about that other than recognizing, oh yeah, that's not feeling great right now. What do I need? I feel like that would be a beautiful starting point. It's almost like an invitation just to start to listen into yourself a little bit more. The other thing that's happening here is estrogen might start to increase, but progesterone's usually normal at this point if your ovulation is still consistent. Then actual perimenopause technically begins when you've had a variable cycle length. So you've had, maybe a 25-day cycle, and then you might just have this sudden little short cycle, because technically, and again, this is just the kind of physiological definition of it. I think, there's kind of other ways we could consider that perimenopause has begun. But in terms of the body, it's an irregular cycle length by a minimum of 7 days. And that's meaning that you're going from one cycle where there probably was enough time for all of those things to occur with the ovulation, luteal phase, etc. Then you're probably having a cycle where you haven't ovulated because it's a shorter cycle where there just hasn't been enough time for that to occur. And more significant estrogen fluctuations are starting at this time, which can really start to cause some of the symptoms that people notice as, oh, something's different. Things like heavier bleeding, heavier menstrual bleeding, and some cognitive changes, this kind of, changes in thinking, changes in memory, changes in, in our ability to be as, on the ball as we once were, to remember every word that we've ever known. All of a sudden it can be like, what? What is that word? And interestingly, migraines can be a feature of this as well. So if you've had migraines in the past, it is possible that they can increase throughout this perimenopause process. But thankfully there are lots of things we can do around that as well. There might be times where you're not ovulating, as I said, which means then there's not the progesterone to buffer the estrogen. And then through the perimenopause process, progesterone levels do start to decline even when you are ovulating. So we're kind of on a slow process of just less and less progesterone as it goes. And it's really variable, but perimenopause often begins in this true sense with the changing cycle length, kind of in the early to mid 40s, say. And then the later stage of perimenopause, which could be late 40s, it could be earlier for some women, could be even be, more into your 50s. Many women are cycling regularly into their 50s. But the later stage of perimenopause is identified by having quite long gaps between cycles. So more, like a 60-day cycle where you're just skipping a bleed in between. And then maybe you have a couple of regular cycles and then you might go 3 months without a cycle. So that pattern of less predictability is telling us that there's times where we've still got maybe those higher estrogen cycles, and times where we're ovulating and making progesterone, but there's going to be times where we're actually, all of those hormones are lower. So there's a real kind of fluctuation here between times of higher estrogen and times of lower estrogen. And lower estrogen is associated more with hot flushes and night sweats, some more significant insomnia and sleep changes. But a really important piece here is also mood. So increased depression and anxiety are a really important feature of perimenopause that can be disregarded or not thought to be part of the changing hormone picture. But it's incredibly important for a woman in her 40s who's experiencing a big change in depression or anxiety to really take that seriously, because this is where the right support to kind of buffer what's happening with the hormone change can make a huge difference to daily life and well-being. And then we graduate to menopause 12 months after the final menstrual period. And then here we're into low estrogen symptoms as a consistent picture. Hot flushes are the most likely at this time. And for some people, it's just a short window of flushing, because it's really about the brain recalibrating to the lower level of estrogen. And the great news, actually, before I say that, I'll tell you the great news. So the average age of menopause is around 51 to 52, but actually it's normal to be 12 months following your final menstrual period from 45 and then out to 55. So there's quite a big window in which you might graduate to menopause. And that's why I'm saying, late 40s maybe, because for some women it's normal to be done and dusted by 45. But do you want to know the great news?
Tell me.
News ever about this whole
Yep.
process? So the way our body recalibrates through perimenopause to our new normal of post-menopause actually includes adaptation to the lower level of estrogen, which involves increasing our estrogen receptor sensitivity. So our estrogen receptors get better at, receiving the estrogen that is there. We actually make new estrogen receptors, and we increase what's called cellular estrogen production to offset the fact that we're not really making it from the ovaries. So we actually do continue to make estrogen post-menopause, and we get better at listening to the estrogen that we have. So this is not a disease state. It's not a deficiency state. It's not, this is a normal life phase that our body knows how to do. And on the other side of it, we're all going to be fine.
Love that. Thank you. The beacon of hope and joy. Yay. I think that's really, really powerful to understand. Thanks for walking us through that. I'm really like hearing all kinds of things I didn't know there. And I'm just want to pick up. So like I've always heard that we stop making estrogen after menopause, but that's not true.
Mm,
We are still like able to, it's not
mm,
coming from our ovaries as such, but it's still in our bodies and we're still able to receive that and, receive all the benefits of that.
mm,
So interesting. So yeah, and I just feel like, there's there's things that you've shared there that give us that sense of like being able to work out where we're at. And I think a lot of people do the age thing, like, well, I'm this age, so and it's like we need to kind of like really take that with a pinch of salt is what I'm really hearing. And instead look at like what changes we are experiencing and understand what kind of symptoms are perimenopause related, even when we think that they're or have been told that they're not, or don't think to look at this as a holistic whole body experience, because that's exactly what it is. Our hormones are affecting all of our systems, not just our reproduction. Um, and to know that like, now more than ever, it's possible, it's easy, it's accessible to find practitioners who will understand us and hear us and not ridicule us or deny us support. And that there's quite a lot out there that we can really be doing. So
absolutely.
walk us through that piece.
Absolutely. I mean, this is where I think it's really powerful to know that there are things you can do every day, and you don't have to do them every day. But this is what I think of as our perimenopause allies. So practices that we can draw on and use to sort of build a scaffold of support. My husband actually came up with the analogy that it's like a bridge. A bridge. Oh, I love that. A bridge from our more stable cycling years into this new normal. And, some of these things require change. Again, it's sort of to meet the challenge of the change we can make, and they can just be little changes at first, but we can, incorporate some, or I guess bring a greater awareness to some of these aspects first, and then find ways to kind of make this part of our daily lives. So the first one I'm going to say, which is, somewhat of a triggering concept, is rest. I know that rest means different things to different people, and people also, I know some, I have this conversation with my clients all the time. Some people just feel like rest is not for them. This is not possible. I'm super busy. I have all of the commitments and I'm needed. People need me. So how could I stop? But what I like to invite people to consider is that rest could just be about going a little slower when you can. It could be about softening a little bit. It could be about planning less, trying to include more unplanned, unstructured time, maybe particularly on the weekends, that there's half a day or a day on the weekend, whatever's within the bounds of possibility for you. I just want to encourage people to potter more, to just be present and be
Love
just
that.
to potter, just to tinker and to, oh yeah, I'm just going to go over there and do that. And I do feel like a cup of tea. Some people resonate more with the idea of creating space, and for me, this is about the space for you to be present to yourself, to the moment, to whatever's happening. And maybe in that space to notice yourself, to notice your body, to sense your needs, to listen to your thoughts. But also it's about creating space to do things that you love. And of course, this is all going to require boundaries and maybe practicing saying no and calling on support, etc. But the benefit, I think, from creating space and slowing down a little bit is it helps, for starters, it helps to support your nervous system to calm down that stress response. And stress is not a bad thing. Our stress hormones are there because they keep us alive and they help us do amazing things. But the balance is there are other hormones we want to promote, like oxytocin. Do we remember this beautiful oxytocin? Anybody who's given birth, someone probably mentioned oxytocin to them at some point, maybe not. But we can promote oxytocin for ourselves every day through hugs and snuggles and the touch of someone or something that you love, your children, your pets, your plant, whatever it is that you just love, being with that thing, that person, creating time and space to do that thing. Oxytocin is actually a key ally in calming our stress response. It also weaves connection and builds community, and it creates a sense of safety and security in our body, which is huge. It sounds simple, but this is huge for perimenopause. Oxytocin's actually being researched for a specific role in perimenopause and menopause because it's thought that it has such a powerful positive effect that it might prevent insulin resistance, support bone health, promote fat burning. And you can build your oxytocin through yoga, meditation, time in nature, listening to music, making music, getting or giving a massage, sharing a meal, having a ladies' lunch, women's circle
Women's
coming together.
circle.
Oh God. In the women's circle I attended on Saturday night, I walked in on the edge of a migraine and then dropped down into the deliciousness of myself and the candlelight and the space and just felt so held and fabulous that the oxytocin worked its magic and I walked out of there
Same.
feeling fabulous, right?
Yeah, I've been having like a lot of neck and pain in my shoulders
Mm.
as well. And I was like holding this space. It was I was obviously talking about my circle that I was holding, and I was kind of like, oh, how am I gonna like really drop out of being really aware and of this pain and drop into, presence with the women in that space. And I've been doing all the things and nothing was helping. And like I went from feeling like tired and kind of like, oh, I'm not sure about this. To like, oh, like deep deliciousness. And we did have a very embodied, delicious practice. Um, where we were like, touching our skin and stroking ourselves and like moving through our hips.
Self-oxytocin.
Self-oxytocin, right? And like we don't even need other people because when you were talking, I was really aware when you were talking about oxytocin then about like, when we need hugs from other people. And there's plenty of people who don't have anyone else that they live with. So like hugs on demand, but also like if we're in this kind of stress state or we might be feeling more rage or like disconnection, like something I'll be really honest, where sometimes like I get in this cycle with my husband where it's like we both just really want to hug each other but we're too stubborn. Like, yes, okay, this is like a deep luteal thing for me sometimes. And it's like we're kind of like all we want is like the hug and like touch each other and hold each other and like connect. But we're both quite good at being like putting a wall up. And I just know that this is going to be a feature of my perimenopause. And it's like actually, like sometimes if that kind of disconnection or like resentment or like displeasure is going to be a real feature of perimenopause, like accessing hugs and oxytocin from other people, like I'm feeling like that's going to be a challenge for me and I'm going to have to like really communicate that need. And like I say to Phil all the time, like I might look like I'm withdrawing and I'm being moody, but all I actually need is a hug and I will melt in your arms and all will be well. But it takes two people to kind of like build a bridge. And
Mm.
so I'm
But
just really like,
what if you could write that on the fridge, you know?
yeah,
So it's
hug
just
me.
there, just a reminder.
Yeah. And then also just like something I have been really doing is like really practicing is this like self massage, or it doesn't need to be like sensual or erotic, but
Mm.
just a little like stroke of my arm or my hands or something can just feel really nice. And I'm just taking that piece. I love that. I love this idea of oxytocin, and
Mm.
it is so healing in all of the ways. Love that. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, because nervous system support is so key to navigating this process well, this is where anything that can help us, drop into our bodies and kind of calm down the stress hormones is huge. And actually, this is where movement comes into. So I talk with every woman in her 40s and beyond about the importance of movement that feels good for you, right? Not punishing yourself, not pushing yourself to, do something that actually, takes too much, I suppose. The caveat around movement is it has to leave you feeling good ultimately, maybe not like in the first half hour after you've finished a session, but it needs to leave you feeling good overall. Because movement, whether I'm personally obsessed with reformer Pilates, and that's been the last couple of years an amazing discovery of how I can come out of a session not completely wiped out in a cardio sense, because that doesn't feel so good for me, but I just feel strong. And this is about protecting bone health. Like at its absolute baseline, movement is essential in your 40s to build healthy bones, stability, physical kind of structural confidence for your old lady body, for your old human body. But we're also supporting brain health. It's incredible for mood. There's absolutely been trials that show that exercise/movement can rival antidepressant medications as far as its benefits for mood. But this is where the metabolic health piece comes into. And I encourage people not to think about exercise for weight loss, and then when you've lost the weight, it's done, or exercise where weight loss is the only goal, because you're improving metabolic health. Even if you don't see things changing on the scales, I actually don't want people to look at scales as much as possible, because you want to build bone, you want to build muscle, those things weigh more. So it should help you feel good in your body and mind and soul.
Energy is everything, and your energy speaks volumes. Did you know that we all hold different frequencies, styles, strengths, and growth areas as leaders? When you're done with masculine, corporate, or patriarchal leadership, you might not even see yourself as a leader, but I know that you are, because you're here listening to this. It's time to shake off all the ways you hold yourself back and step into what is possible for you when you awaken and embody your feminine leadership to show up authentically and lead with soul as you share your magic and medicine more fully in the world. Sometimes we just need a magic mirror to help us see ourselves more fully so we can appreciate our own strengths and skills and learn to really use them for good. Take my Sacred Feminine Leadership Archetype quiz now to learn how to tap into your authentic energy, so when you show up, it feels easy, natural, and inspiring. Understand how to best attract your soul sister squad, how to tap into your natural wisdom, how to use your innate strengths, and how to work with your shadows. We need you in your full expression, leading from your feminine energy, so together we can create ripples of change around the world. Take my juicy quiz now to get your own keepsake guide at charlottepointo.com/quiz.
And alongside the movement piece is food. There's lots to talk about when we come to food and supporting and choosing healthy and supportive foods in perimenopause. A couple of things I'll say here though are that protein in the morning, almost all of us need to eat more protein in the morning, and let's say by 10 a.m. Our body is working pretty hard through this complex process of recalibration of perimenopause, and protein will boost energy, create better nervous system stability because it prevents big fluctuations of blood sugar. And this will also reduce sugar cravings later in the day, which ultimately supports metabolic health because we're less likely to reach for snacky things. There's a huge conversation to have around sugar cravings. And again, Lara Brydon has a beautiful metabolic health book that I highly recommend, because I think having increased sugar cravings can be a feature of perimenopause. And a lot of women start to really beat themselves up about that. You know, I want to achieve these things with my health, but I keep doing the wrong thing by eating the sweet foods. And I think that needs investigation to see if there are underlying metabolic obstacles, with your GP, with your naturopath, etc. But it also needs a process that includes a lot of self-compassion, because part of the challenge of perimenopause is that things as we've talked about, the kind of consistent, reliable aspects to the way we live our lives become less consistent and reliable, and sugar cravings and the types of foods that we want to eat can be a part of that. But I really want to encourage everybody to eat enough. This is not the time to be drastically limiting the amount of food that you eat. You can change the composition of food that you eat, more protein, more veggies, emphasize fiber, fruits, nuts, seeds, gentle carbs, which I consider to be the kind of less inflammatory version of carbohydrate foods like brown rice or even white rice in small amounts, quinoa for anybody who's not Charlotte, um, sweet potato and potato.
Just for the audience, quinoa makes me extremely sick. Random, I know.
No
quinoa.
No one makes Charlotte quinoa cookies. But it's really important that we eat enough, because having adequate nourishment supports our detoxification, which helps to provide some more stability to our hormone picture. It supports gut health and feeds our microbiome, which becomes really important at this stage from an immune, metabolic, and nervous system point of view. And not eating enough can negatively impact the thyroid, which can create its own set of issues. It can impact immunity. Not eating enough can impact sleep and the nervous system. So I encourage everybody to allow yourself to be well nourished and to not make food the enemy at this time. But that's obviously a much bigger conversation that I implore you to have with a clinician who, can really go through exactly what you feel like your challenges are, and do that in a loving and compassionate way that tells you that you're not a bad person because you eat chocolate.
Amen. Love, love, love. Oh, there was so many things in there that I was like, oh wow, that's really interesting. And just like note to self. Yeah, and I feel like the way you're approaching this is like not punitive. It's like additive. It's like, what can we add in? What can we do to support without like, this isn't a time of punishment. This isn't a time of like, trying to hold on to like maybe the body that we had even, but like what do we need at this phase to feel strong and to feel, like we're supporting ourselves, like you said, for our old lady bodies, that, we're going to be, um, you know, rocking life in our 80s, no doubt. So yeah, love all those tips. And I think that yeah, I think as well, like what I sort of feel like is like, we know this. I think we know this to a point. It's like we know these things are important. And I think that, maybe in like cruising through life so far, we can be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know I should exercise more. I know I shouldn't eat as much chocolate. I know I need to eat more protein. I know I need to sleep better. And it's like, but like we can put it off. And this is like, I know I can be guilty of this for sure. But it's like in the fullness of life, the fullness of motherhood, the fullness of work, the fullness of whatever, like life's always going to be full, really. But we have to take responsibility for these things and stop putting it off. And because our body's really going to call us into like checking ourselves so we don't wreck ourselves.
Indeed.
But like what a beautiful like opportunity to really kind of like, look at this incredible vessel that we have and be like, right, I get to enjoy this body and I'm going to feel well in this time. And I'm not going to just kind of coast along and, like we get to choose basically. Are we going to take the path we've maybe always taken, or are we going to take this as an opportunity to really be like in devotion to ourselves? And, like you said, this whole second half of our lives that like, hasn't even begun yet.
Oh, we're just like we're like looking towards the second half of our lives and thinking, what might that hold? Like what excitement and riches and experiences, yeah, what might that hold? I'm very excited about living for another 40 to 50 years, let's say. Who
I
knows? Who
know.
knows what's
Exciting.
possible? Can,
Yeah, I agree.
can I share a couple more specific tools that people might want to
Cool.
consider bringing into their toolkit? Some things that, you could pretty safely do on your own if you wanted to. But obviously, I recommend also finding a great practitioner of whatever type feels good. But naturopaths are so well set up to support humans through perimenopause because we've got the whole toolkit, the whole body picture, the whole, beautiful holistic perspective. But I'm actually talking a lot with my clients about soy, a food to consider if you're not already including it in your diet. And obviously, there are some
To
people.
include soy.
Yeah, this
Oh,
is
I
why
thought
I
you were going
wanted
to
to.
say exclude soy.
No, this is why we
Oh,
have to have this conversation because the research keeps going around in circles, and we've come around to the place where there is a significant body of research to support the benefits of soy. Soy doesn't increase our estrogen levels as such, but it acts as a stimulator of our estrogen receptors. So just like our body is ultimately going to improve the way our receptors are sensitive to a lower level of estrogen, before that process has happened, we can provide some more consistent stimulation of our estrogen receptors, which equals more stability through the fluctuations of perimenopause by eating soy. We're actually using it as a supplement as well. So it's called soy isoflavones. It's kind of accessible in Australia. We're working on making that more accessible. But the thing that you could start doing now is just embracing a little more tofu, a little more tempeh, if you can stomach it, which I unfortunately can't. A little more miso, a little more edamame, beans. Um, and look, soy milk doesn't, you'd have to drink a lot of soy milk to get the kind of therapeutic dose, but including soy milk, if that feels okay for you to do that, is fine. The caveat is that some people don't do well with soy, and you will quickly work out if that's you, I think. But for most people, including some soy in your diet in a regular sense, like even, well, as often as you could, depending on the severity of your symptoms, is a really supportive practice to try. I like tofu
it is.
cubes, firm tofu, cut up into little cubes, and I saute it with coconut oil, tamari. You know those coconut aminos? You can get them in the health food aisle of the supermarket. It's sort of like a sweet and sour, but it's like more natural. Anyway, just a little bit of all those things and saute it. And my son really likes it. He will eat it. Eat the cubes. And then you could
Yeah.
have that in the fridge. And whatever else you're eating, you could just put a few cubes on the side. Or if you're taking a salad to work or whatever you're doing, this is obviously a much bigger conversation you could have with your naturopath or nutritionist, but consider soy. Uh, yeah, there's so much more to say about food. But I'm going to talk quickly about one group of herbal medicines I'd love you to consider, and they are the adaptogen herbal medicines, which essentially means that they improve your body's ability to adapt to stress or your stress resilience. Most of them have some kind of nervous system calming action. In fact, I'd say that, most of them do. And the really gorgeous thing that they do, and I refer to it as giving your adrenals a big hug. So your adrenal glands produces stress hormones. They're often, quite busy in our busy lives, but also through perimenopause. So we just want to give those adrenals a big hug and say, oh, guys, you're doing a great job. And yeah, some of these herbs that you might consider are things like withania, which is also called ashwagandha. I particularly love tulsi. which the Pucker brand of teas do a 3 Tulsi, which is really lovely, but you can get it. There's a few different, it's also called holy basil. Annoyingly, our herbs often have multiple names. And then there's the ginseng herbs, some of which are more stimulating than others. It's a beautiful herb called Rhamania, and rhodiola comes into this as well. I actually love St. John's wort, which is less of an adaptogen, more of a nervous system soother. But the whole mood anxiety piece has actually personally been quite a big feature for me. So I'm taking St. John's wort pretty consistently through these last few years, and it just feels like a beautiful supportive. It just kind of drops the intensity of the stress hormones when I can feel them coming up, and helps me with sleep. On
That
that
one that
topic,
you can't have with the pill?
yeah, correct. So St. John's wort has definite contraindications. Really, if you're taking any kind of medications, the pill would be included in that. St. John's wort is also a liver tonic herb, but it has quite a specific effect on the way medications are processed by the liver. So you do have to be really careful not to pair St. John's wort with any medications, and in particular, any other antidepressant or anti-anxiety medications, because it can then, affect the way those medications work. And yeah, so definitely St. John's wort is one to be really wary of if you're going out and trying to source things on your own. But the rest of the herbs, yeah, if you're taking medications or have kind of more complex things going on with mental health, I think it's worth seeing a practitioner, seeing a herbalist, talking to someone who has training with herbal medicine around the best herbs for you as an individual. But the nutrient magnesium is pretty much great. We should probably just put it in the water, because it is pretty much great for most people, let's say. There've been very, very few people in my clinical experience who haven't had some sort of benefit from magnesium, or for whom magnesium is not indicated, let's put it that way. It's an incredibly supportive herb through nutrient through perimenopause, because it supports nervous system health. It calms down stress hormones, but it also promotes sleep. So you can take it morning or night, and it will both support energy production and sleep, as in whenever you take it, you'll get some kind of benefit from it. It also supports metabolic health. It's anti-inflammatory. It's indicated for thyroid dysfunction. It's just great. It's just a really, really, really good nutrient. There's lots of different ways to take it. I personally like powdered forms, because when it's all packed into a tablet, if someone's digestive system isn't doing a great job of breaking down tablets, which, let's be honest, it can be a big ask, the powdered form means that's already been done. You're just drinking it. It comes in more easily. Some people really like doing it topically as well. You can have a bath in magnesium flakes or do a spray. Again, to get the therapeutic dose, my favorite way to do it is therapeutic dose in some sort of drink. There are specific forms that are better tolerated than others. I really like, I quite like the citrate form, but there's also benefits from the bisglycinate form, because glycine is also a really helpful nutrient for all of the things that we want. And the last thing I want to speak to is the role of body identical hormones in this process. I'm seeing the role of, so this is usually topical estrogen and an oral progesterone, but there's other ways to do it. But the benefit of where we are right now compared to even 5 or 10 years ago is that we have body identical versions of these hormones. So the HRT of the past was not this. It was different forms of the hormones, not identical to what we make in our body. Now we have access to these medications essentially, but we have access to these tools that can gently support our own estrogen and progesterone levels. They're not going to return them to the cycling levels, but they can create some consistency to buffer the transition, and they can have a huge impact on reducing concerning symptoms. So where someone's having significant mood challenges, I'm 100% recommending that they speak to their GP about body identical hormones, because there can be really significant negative impacts on quality of life for some people. And this is where it's so fantastic that we have access to this. The challenge can be sometimes finding someone who's really across the best practice, which, as I said, is topical estrogen, oral progesterone, done in slightly different ways depending on if you are still cycling regularly or if you're post-menopause and you're not cycling anymore. There's just different dosages, etc. But again, a lot of naturopaths now are becoming quite well versed in this option. So I'm finding I'm having a lot of conversations with clients where they've seen their GP, they've been given the script, they've been given some instructions, but they still have questions about the best practice. And so I'm then talking them through, okay, well, let's try it this way. Not that I'm the prescriber of these medications, not in any way, but just to help people get the best use within the guidelines. There's very clear guidelines that you can access from the Australian Menopause Society, but sometimes it just requires a bigger conversation that they haven't had the chance to have at that point of prescription. So it's something I'm finding incredibly rewarding, to be able to help people make the most of their body identical hormones and feel better.
That's great. I'm glad you touched on that as well, because there's a lot of talk about it, and like a lot of shame about it, I think, as well, about taking it because it's like taking the pill sort of connotation of like, we're trying to avoid menopause, or we're trying to resist the transition, or we're just kind of medicating it. And it's like, actually there are people who really need this, and it's not synthetic
Mm.
drugs that we're taking. It's natural, well, not natural, but it's bioidentical, and it's able to work with the body and just really support and buffer us. What would you say to somebody who was like considering this, but it's kind of like, oh, should I, shouldn't I?
I'll say, first of all, we used to call it bioidentical because it came from a compounding chemist and it was just a different phrasing. Now, if you're going to talk to your GP, you must say body identical.
Body identical.
Yes.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yes, no, very important. Yeah, look, what I'm finding with all of the clients over the years I've been really focusing on this area clinically, the hormones don't take away the whole process. So if you're worried that you're, going to kind of miss out on the other levels of this process, the other, psychospiritual aspects, my experience is all of the things we've talked about, all those allies are still important. And you're still going through a process of change. You're still going through this recalibration transition. I really like to encourage people to think of the hormones as part of the toolkit. It's not either or. You can still use herbs. You can still have nutrients in your kit that are going to be supportive, as you move through, and food, movement, all of those pieces of the puzzle are still key. And the other thing to consider is this is not a linear trajectory through perimenopause where hormones are just, each month they're just a bit lower. And so we bring in our hormones that we make ourselves. They're not declining at this kind of predictable rate. It's all over the shop, theoretically. So I like to think of the body identical hormones as being a part of the toolkit. I personally take oral progesterone sometimes, and I kind of dabble in it a bit, and I don't take it for the full, length of time that it's recommended to take in each cycle. I might use it for just a few nights before I know my period is probably coming. So I think we can see them as tools that play a role sometimes, maybe not all the time, and for some people not might never be necessary. I don't subscribe to the idea that everybody needs the hormones. There is a school of thought around, and there's research, thankfully. We're doing so much more research now into postmenopausal women's experiences, but there is a thought, particularly if you go into menopause early. I mean, like before 45 is considered early. There is a real role then for the hormones to be used for a period of time to kind of to kind of bring you through to where you then would have been going through menopause in that more kind of normal age range, because the earlier loss of hormones can set you up for some risks later on. Yeah. So it's a very individualized picture. I think it's an important conversation to have, maybe with a number of care providers. If you've got a naturopath who wants to have this conversation, who's kind of across this, then brilliant. And your GP, and your best friend. I feel like this is just a conversation we can all be having, is would this be helpful? And also to see it as something that you can experiment with.
Yeah. Love, 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 love. And I feel very lucky that you fill two of these roles for me, naturopath and best friend. So I feel so lucky. Thank you.
Lols.
But,
the conversations we'll be having for the next decade.
So we're putting on an event soon, International Women's Day, with another friend practitioner, Sinead. And we've called it Fearless, and it's a 1-day retreat all about like this kind of knowledge and wisdom and support and preparation for perimenopause. So whether you're in the throes of it now, or whether you're like, this is sort of on the horizon and you're kind of like, ooh, at some point I'm going to need to start thinking about this. Like wherever you're at on that kind of, I guess, spectrum, maybe a word, I'm not sure, or like journey. Like we're really hoping to create this day. And so I'm going to throw this straight over to you. What is your hope and intention for like what are you bringing to that day? What do you like really hope women get out of, this conversation that day around perimenopause?
I mean, I really want to help people feel informed. A lot of what I've talked about in this conversation, I'm going to expand on in for our Fearless retreat, and go into lots more detail about specific tools. I had to stop myself then from going into more detail and bringing in more foods. I already talked about more herbs that I was going to. I can't help it. So it's to just really, it's almost like having a naturopathic group consultation where I'll be kind of sharing that knowledge that I would be sharing one-to-one when someone's sitting in my clinic room. So I want people to feel informed, and from that I want them to feel empowered, that there's a whole kit of things we can use to support the process, but also the process itself does not have to be feared.
Yes. Love, 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 love. Yeah. And so Sinead's going to come on the day as well. She's a breathwork practitioner, and her focus is really about like, okay, so we're going to feel activated, we're going to feel stressed, we might feel triggered, we might have these moments of time that are like, oh, really full on. And it's not about avoiding that as such, but it's like bringing in tools to manage stress, to manage our bodies, to manage our reactions, and bring like ourselves back from these really heightened states back to a kind of place where we can, really live our lives well and thrive. So she's going to be guiding a really amazing session, really talking about like what the body's going through in terms of stress, and how to listen to our bodies, tools and practices to like notice how we're feeling, and then very, very practical tools, including breath work that we can use by ourselves without needing to go to a class or like, outsource again, to help us to be with these changes and these fluctuations and the mood and the energy and stress that might come up for us.
Well, this is it. It's one thing to say, change is inevitable. And then it's another to actually set people up with the ability to self-regulate, or to kind of find nervous system safety with a practical tool. I'm super excited about learning some more actual, practices from Sinead around, kind of coming back to myself in that moment. And yeah, and Charlotte, I'm also very excited for your piece of our fearless retreat. What will you be doing?
Mm. So my piece is going to be like bringing it all together at the end of the day, and I'm going to be offering a guided embodiment journey, a shamanic journey to really like connect with this part of ourselves that's being changed, and set ourselves up for really honoring this as a rite of passage, and seeing this, framing this as a rite of passage. And as I was saying, right at the top of this, like, we've been through rites of passages, we've had our first period, we've like potentially been a mother, and we've been through these cycling years. And, you know, it's this real opportunity for us to really deeply connect with ourselves and our bodies in this moment, and to kind of really appreciate the fact that we are being worked into a different person for the second half of our lives, where we're not so focused on nurturing or, raising small humans, or um, kind of playing out some of those patterns that we might have kept hold of even through, our earlier years. And we're being really shaped into this enchantress woman, this wild woman in this phase of life that some people might identify with and might not. But I think that there's a lot of fear as well about, the fact that you know, this is a time of life of great change. There are statistics about divorce and mental health that can really come up at this time, and in change, especially when we've lived all of our lives very much secure in who we are and what we do, and I know who I am and I know what my purpose is, and change, like, we go through life kind of secure, I guess, in those identities and roles. And then, things like perimenopause comes along, and it's like all up in the air. And some people can really struggle with that. It can really bring to the fore, like, where we're kind of attached and not willing to be with change. And this is a change process, like Soph said, fundamentally. So I really want to guide us through this process where we can, some people might be really willing and ready to, like, and excited to embrace like that next level of feminine power, where we're like, who am I going to be, and what's my legacy going to be, and like, how am I evolving? Like, bring it on. And then for others, it's going to be like, holy fuck, like what might happen through this process? What might I get rid of? Who might I no longer be married to? Like, what job might I throw in? Like, what am I going to lose? I think there's a real sense of loss, maybe losing being in that motherhood phase of life as well. So I think there's a real need for us to honor almost like the grief and loss and change that can be there, but also welcoming in this opportunity for healing and reclamation and deep honoring. So I'm going to be really focused on, like, how can we set this up for as an empowering rite of passage, where we're going in with eyes open. We're going into the mystery, into the void. We are going to be undone, like, a caterpillar builds a cocoon around itself and completely dissolves, but somehow miraculously gets put back together from the goo into a butterfly. It is going to be like that. That doesn't need to be a terrifying thing. And I'm feel quite honest with myself that I sort of stand with one foot in either camp. Like, a huge, like, probably majority part of me is like, fuck yes, bring it on. But the other part of me is like a bit scared of what I might fuck up and change, and like what might happen, and like, how is this really going to be? So having community, having support, having ritual, having a circle, like really tapping into the wisdom of our body, like, how can we trust the process ultimately, is what I really want to bring through, to kind of weave in the wisdom so sharing from this practical health, like, let's take radical care of ourselves point of view. Sinead, like, with these tools that we'll be able to there, like, practice there and then in the moment too. And then, like, okay, how can we really set this up through through the psycho-spiritual realm, really.
Mm.
So yeah, I feel really honored to be able to, hold this space for us to not feel like we're just going to ignore it until like the last minute, and then it's like something that we're kind of fearing. It's like a bit taboo, like, oh my God, are we like banging on about perimenopause all the time? It's like, this is the space for that. This is the space where these conversations are welcomed, but we're not going to descend into the fear of it. And, Soph came up with the name Fearless because there is so much conversation at the minute and framing about like, oh, well, watch out because it's a bit of a shit show. It's like, well, sure, if we're going through unconsciously or without intention or in denial, but, even we do have tools, we do have support. We're in this very new phase of life, a new world where there is knowledge and there are tools and there are GPs who can we can actually go and talk to and not be entirely gaslit. And there are women who want to have these conversations, even if that's not your like immediate circle of friends, maybe, or if you can't talk about it with your partner. So we're putting this day together that's going to be holistic, empowering, supportive, and just really like bringing community together, bringing women who are like wanting to um not like take charge and control it because we can never do that, but like gather in like the medicine toolkit of like, okay, what might I need and what can I practice now and what will I be able to lean on, and I can go back to the things that we talked about and learned on that day.
Mm.
Anything else to add?
Ah, well, it's going to be divine doing it in person in Mittagong, of course. For anyone listening who's not in the Southern Highlands, you're welcome to come down for the weekend. It's
Yeah.
lovely in the Highlands in March. Yeah, it's going to be beautiful to do it in person because that circle experience is so powerful. I do think there's scope to have this conversation in a more broadly, maybe in other mediums if there's call for that. But yeah, let's start where we're starting, and I'm
Yeah.
thrilled to be doing this.
Mhm. I'll pop the link in the show notes if anyone wants to come and join us. We've got early bird tickets available right now. Bring a bestie, where it's a small, intimate circle space. So we're not having like a huge, giant workshop. So we're going to be able to really, connect and support you as well. 8th of March. Southern Highlands, Mittagong, Australia, a whole day shebang. Come and join us. And for anybody who like needs naturopathic support, can't find someone in their area who's like across all this stuff, Soph is your gal. She works online. She has Zoom clinic. Tell us, Soph, how can people book in with you?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a website, which is my name, which you can put in the show notes, sophiegleitzman.com.au. And I offer telehealth, so I can work with you if you're anywhere in Australia. I don't see clients internationally at this stage. But yes, anywhere in Australia, feel free to reach out. You can book an appointment through my website, but you can also just send me an email. I'm totally fine with that. If you want to start the conversation. And yeah, I'm so excited about this time in healthcare for women, for humans going through perimenopause. There are so many fabulous options, and I'm just thrilled to be part of offering that support.
Thank you so much for your time, Soph. Love chatting with you as always. We always go down the rabbit hole. So yeah, I'm just so looking forward to the Fearless, and thanks so much for sharing all of your wisdom. No doubt this is going to be one people keep returning to, bookmarking, and like, what was that again?
Yes. I know, a lot of information, lots to take in, but think of it as your first step towards, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening, my love. To reclaim your wild feminine power, magic, and flow is an act of sacred rebellion, and it's needed now more than ever. Share this episode with a sister, share on socials, leave a review, and support this podcast and movement to grow and deepen around the world. To discover, activate, and embody your sacred feminine leadership archetype, take the quiz now at charlottefonto.com/quiz to find if you're a mystic, muse, connector, or challenger to become the feminine leader you're born to be. And until next time, my love, be devoted to your body as guide, your cycle as oracle, and your sisterhood as allies.